Andrea Boyette was last seen in Lakeland, Florida, on December 23, 1994. Her family reported that she appeared distraught on the day of her disappearance. At the time, she had been married for 3 months to John Edward Johnny Boyette, whose photograph is included with this case summary. Andrea had confided in her relatives about troubles in her marriage and had expressed a desire for someone to accompany her when picking up John after his work shift, but her loved ones were unable to join her. John informed investigators that he and Andrea visited several bars along Cypress Gardens Boulevard in Winter Haven, Florida, that evening, returning to their rented house on Eastway Drive in Lakeland later that night. He claimed that Andrea vanished from their home while he was in the bathroom. However, her 3 children, who were present that evening, contradicted his statement. Andrea was never heard from again, and her grandmother reported her missing on March 3, 1995, over 2 months after her disappearance. John claimed to have found Andrea's jewelry near their vehicle outside their residence, while another relative reported finding the items on the front porch shortly afterward. John apparently sold most of Andrea's valuables to local pawn shops, with his name appearing on the receipts, and he abandoned her children at their babysitter's home. He allegedly told a friend that he had run over Andrea with their car on the night of her disappearance, though this statement was never verified. John had a criminal record, including charges of battery and domestic battery. He remarried after Andrea's disappearance and had a child. In February 2004, Andrea's son from a prior relationship, Dustin Cunningham, informed investigators that he had witnessed her murder in 1994 when he was 9 years old. He stated that he saw John choke Andrea outside their home until she vomited, after which John drove away with her and returned without her, later making the children clean up the vomit in the car. In June 2004, John's brother, Robert Boyette, confessed to assisting John in disposing of Andrea's remains, stating that they were weighted with chains and blocks and dumped in an artificial lake at the Norland Mine, a phosphate mine in Bartow, Florida, where John worked at the time. The lake has since been filled with tons of dirt, and authorities do not believe they can recover Andrea's body. In August 2004, a grand jury indicted John for second-degree murder in connection with Andrea's case. With prior convictions for burglary and theft, his trial was set for May 2006. However, days before jury selection, John accepted a plea deal, pleading no contest to manslaughter and receiving an 8-year prison sentence. A no-contest plea does not admit guilt, but acknowledges sufficient evidence for conviction at trial. John was paroled in October 2009. Andrea's loved one stated that it was uncharacteristic of her to leave her children without warning, and foul play is suspected in her case due to the circumstances involved. Georgia Brown and her young son, Karam Govins, were last seen leaving Brown's mother's home in Port St. Lucie, Florida, on September 22, 2017. The pair were in Brown's silver 2003 Toyota Camry, which bore the Florida license plate ENS Q75. Brown had been living in Parkland, Florida, but had moved in with her mother due to marital problems. On the night of their disappearance, Brown received a phone call that seemed to upset her. According to her mother, Brown appeared very distressed and frightened by the conversation and was in a hurry when she and Karam left the house around 12:30 a.m. They never arrived at their intended destination. Her mother reported her missing 3 days later. Since then, Brown's cellular phone has been turned off, and there has been no further contact. Despite the disappearance, the police did not initially issue a warrant. However, on November 28, 2017, a felony warrant for interference with custody was issued for Brown after it was confirmed that she and Karam had been in Broward County, Florida, following their disappearance. Authorities have not been able to locate Brown or Karam, and their current whereabouts and well-being remain unknown. While a warrant for her arrest was issued, Brown's mother has stated that it's entirely uncharacteristic of her daughter to leave without any notice. She fears that Brown and Karam may have met with foul play. Brown, a graduate of Hofstra University, was working as a social worker at the time of her disappearance. Despite extensive efforts, Georgia Brown and Karam Govins' cases remain unsolved, and their fate is still shrouded in mystery. Sabrina Brazzle was last seen in St. Augustine, Florida, during the early morning hours of August 20th, 2006. At the time of her disappearance, she was living on West 3rd Street, where her home was still under construction. Sabrina has never been heard from again, and her husband, Jimmy Brazzle, was the one who reported her missing. Not long after her disappearance, some of Sabrina's belongings were discovered scattered along West 4th Street, raising concerns about her safety. When Jimmy contacted law enforcement to report his wife missing, he was promptly arrested on charges of domestic battery. This arrest was connected to an incident that had occurred several days prior when Sabrina called police and reported that Jimmy had physically assaulted her by kicking and punching her inside their home. However, when officers arrived to investigate her claims, Jimmy was nowhere to be found. It wasn't until he came forward to report Sabrina missing that authorities were finally able to locate and arrest him. Despite his initial arrest, Jimmy was eventually released from jail. However, his trouble with the law didn't end there. In 2007, he was rearrested on serious charges after allegedly abducting a woman from the street and sexually assaulting her. Although Jimmy was questioned about Sabrina's disappearance, authorities have never officially named him as a suspect. Nonetheless, they did conduct a thorough search of the Brazzle home in hopes of finding evidence, even searching for Sabrina's body, but nothing significant was found during their investigation. Sabrina's family was left devastated, especially because she had been making plans to move in with her daughter in Georgia before vanishing. It was highly unusual for Sabrina to leave without any notice or communication, making her disappearance even more concerning. Over the years, there have been numerous reports of people spotting Sabrina in the Jacksonville, Florida area, but none of these sightings have been confirmed. The circumstances surrounding her case remain murky, particularly regarding whether the reported domestic violence incident was directly related to her disappearance. Despite the lack of evidence tying Jimmy directly to her vanishing, he has continued to be viewed as a person of interest by investigators due to his history of violence and his lack of cooperation with the ongoing investigation. More than 17 years later, Sabrina's whereabouts remain unknown, her case unsolved, and foul play is strongly suspected. Christine Blackburn Wiles was last seen in Bellevue, Florida, at 1 a.m. on April 21, 2007. She had been out drinking with her sister that day, visiting several bars, and her boyfriend, Billy Joe Ashton Sr., followed them. At one point, Blackburn Wiles asked her sister to pull over, and she got into the 1995 Chrysler New Yorker that Ashton was driving. Ashton later claimed that he and Blackburn Wiles had an argument, and that he dropped her off around the corner from where her estranged husband lived. However, her husband denied having seen her. After that night, Blackburn Wiles was never heard from again. At first, her family thought she had gone to Texas. She was reported missing in early May, after she failed to contact her daughter on the girl's 16th birthday, which was out of character for Blackburn Wiles. While she had a drinking problem, it was uncharacteristic of her to not reach out to her child. On July 24th, the vehicle that Blackburn Wiles was last seen in was found at Wildcat Lake in Lake County, Florida, near the home of one of Ashton's relatives. Her blood was found in the trunk. A witness came forward, telling police that they had seen Ashton burn items from the trunk of the Chrysler. Investigators went to the location of the fire and dug it up, finding fragments of clothing, including buttons from a pair of faded Glory jeans. Blackburn Wiles often wore that brand. Ashton was incarcerated shortly after Blackburn Wiles' disappearance. Some of her missing persons posters were put up in the jail, and he reportedly tore them down. He allegedly told an informant that he had elbowed Blackburn Wiles in the face, knocking her out. He claimed he wiped up her blood with a towel, which he then put in the trunk of the car, explaining how her blood had ended up there. He also stated he had gotten rid of her. Ashton has a history of violent behavior, including a conviction for kidnapping and assaulting another girlfriend in 1998, for which he served 6 years in prison. In June 2010, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison for possession of a firearm by a habitual offender. Less than 24 hours later, he was charged with second-degree murder in connection to Blackburn Wiles' case. Authorities explained that the evidence against Ashton was largely circumstantial, relying on tips from informants, DNA analysis, and witness statements. However, in February 2013, the case against Ashton was dropped due to insufficient proof. Authorities have indicated that charges could be refiled if more evidence comes to light. Ashton remains incarcerated for the weapons offense. Foul play is suspected in Blackburn Wiles' disappearance due to the suspicious circumstances surrounding her case. Peggy Baston vanished on the evening of April 2, 1965, under mysterious and troubling circumstances. That day, she left her residence at the corner of 3rd Street and Central Avenue in Highland City, Florida, between 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock p.m., intending to head to the Chatterbox Bar, a now-defunct establishment that once stood near the intersection of the Polk County Parkway and southbound Highway 98, close to Eden Park. She was driving her light green, two-door 1959 Chevrolet Coupe, bearing the Florida license plate number 5W. 21118. Witnesses reported seeing Baston in the bar's parking lot later that evening, where she was accompanied by an unidentified Caucasian man. According to those who saw her, the man appeared to be helping her with a mechanical issue involving her vehicle. This would be the last time anyone saw or heard from Baston, and her car disappeared alongside her, never to be found again. Her family, alarmed by her sudden disappearance, reported her missing that very same day. At the time of her disappearance, Baston was a divorced mother of 2 young children and worked as a waitress to provide for her family. Her loved ones have consistently described her as a devoted mother with no known enemies, and they have repeatedly emphasized that it would be completely out of character for her to abandon her children. Following her disappearance, her children moved in with her sister and brother-in-law, but the family was left devastated and confused by her sudden vanishing. Over the years, investigators have continued to search for Baston and any trace of her vehicle, but despite their efforts, they have never identified a suspect in her case. Her disappearance has remained an open investigation, but authorities have been unable to produce any solid leads or definitive answers as to what happened to her that fateful night. Speculation has arisen over the years regarding possible connections between Baston's case and another unsolved disappearance that occurred in the same area just 5 years later. Mary Cook, another young mother of 2, vanished from Highland City in November 1970 and was never located. Both women were in their 20s, both were mothers of 2 children, and both lived on the same street in Highland City. However, despite these striking similarities, investigators have been unable to definitively link the 2 cases. Additionally, there is no evidence to suggest that Baston and Cook knew each other personally, further complicating any efforts to establish a connection between their disappearances. Nonetheless, the eerie parallels between the 2 cases have left both families and the community wondering if a more sinister pattern was at play in Highland City during that time. What remains clear, however, is that foul play is suspected in Baston's disappearance. Authorities have classified her as missing under suspicious circumstances, and over the decades, her case has become one of Polk County's enduring mysteries. The fact that her car, a distinctive light green Chevrolet Coupe, vanished along with her has added an extra layer of complexity to the case. Typically, abandoned vehicles are found in missing persons cases, providing clues to a person's last known whereabouts. But in Baston's situation, the complete disappearance of both her and the car has left investigators with few tangible leads to pursue. The mystery deepens with the fact that she was last seen in the company of an unidentified man who appeared to be helping her with her car's mechanical problems in the Chatterbox Bar parking lot. Despite witness reports of this interaction, investigators have never been able to identify or locate this man, leaving a critical gap in the timeline of events leading up to her disappearance. Her family has never given up hope of finding answers, but as decades have passed with no new leads or breakthroughs, her case has faded into the background of Florida's many cold cases. Doris Carter was last seen at the home she shared with her daughter in the 1500 block of McLean Drive in Plant City, Florida, on December 16, 2011. That day, she disappeared along with her girlfriend, Kelly Moriarty, and Moriarty's vehicle. The sudden disappearance of both women went unnoticed for several days due to their families not immediately raising concerns, as it was not unusual for the pair to drop out of sight for extended periods. However, by December 20th, a troubling clue emerged when Moriarty's car was discovered abandoned on State Road 62 in Parrish, Florida. Despite the car's recovery, there was no trace of either woman, and the circumstances surrounding their vanishing remained a mystery. Moriarty, who lived in an apartment in Bradenton, Florida, left her residence fully intact. Christmas decorations were still up, and unopened gifts sat inside, indicating she had not planned to be away for long. Her family, who last saw her at Thanksgiving, did not immediately report her missing, which explains the delay in the investigation. Moriarty was eventually reported missing on January 27th, and Carter was reported missing 2 days later on January 29th. However, before any meaningful progress could be made in locating them, a gruesome discovery was made. On December 27th, more than a week after their disappearance, a severed leg washed ashore in St. Petersburg, Florida. Authorities determined that the leg belonged to Kelly Moriarty, and forensic analysis revealed it had likely been in the water for only a couple of days before being found. In March 2012, the leg was officially identified as Moriarty's through DNA testing. To this day, the rest of her body has not been located, and the cause of her death, as well as how her leg was severed, remains unknown. Moriarty was just 38 years old at the time of her death. Doris Carter had experienced significant changes in her life before her disappearance. Following the death of her husband in 2005, she began dating Moriarty in 2009. According to Carter's daughter, the relationship between the two women was both passionate and volatile, characterized by frequent arguments. Despite the tension in their relationship, there is no clear indication of what could have led to their disappearance or Moriarty's death. Since Doris Carter went missing, she has not accessed her financial accounts or used her phone, further deepening the mystery surrounding her fate. Her daughter and son-in-law were living in her home at the time of her disappearance, but their presence there had become contentious. In fact, Carter was in the process of evicting them. An eviction order had been issued just a day before she and Moriarty vanished. Despite this, Carter's daughter continues to reside in the home and has maintained that she has no knowledge of what happened to her mother or Kelly Moriarty. The timing of the eviction notice and the disappearance has raised suspicions, but no definitive links have been established. The circumstances of Doris Carter's disappearance remain unclear, but authorities have expressed concern for her welfare, particularly given the discovery of Moriarty's remains. Anton, Cesar, and his wife, Danka, were walking together near Lido Beach in Sarasota, Florida, during the evening hours of November 1st, 2001, when Anton mysteriously vanished without a trace. The couple had been strolling along the scenic coastline, enjoying the peaceful evening, and were last seen in the 400 block of Benjamin Franklin Drive at approximately 9 o'clock p.m. As they made their way toward their parked vehicle near St. Armand's Circle in the Lido Key area, a seemingly minor disagreement over directions would mark the last time anyone saw Anton. Danka later told authorities that Anton believed she was heading in the wrong direction and had stopped walking to correct her course. She continued on for about 100 yards before turning to check on his progress, a habit they had developed during their walk since Anton often lagged behind her. To her growing concern, he was nowhere in sight. Anton had no money or identification on him when he disappeared, making the situation all the more perplexing. After realizing something was wrong, Danka spent approximately 90 minutes searching for her husband before finally contacting the authorities at 10:30 p.m. The Sarasota Police Department, however, came under fire for their handling of the initial stages of the investigation. The responding officer conducted only a brief interview with Danka before launching a limited search of the immediate vicinity. Shockingly, it wasn't until the following afternoon that an aerial search was initiated, losing valuable time in the critical early hours after Anton's disappearance. Following public backlash and criticism from local residents and the media, officials acknowledged that the investigation had been mishandled from the start. In response, They increased public exposure of Anton's case, hoping to garner new leads or tips from the community. Anton and Danka were longtime residents of Hemhofen, Germany, where they lived for most of the year. However, they had a second home in Sarasota, located in the 1800 block of Tulip Street, where they would spend their winters. Anton, a retired architect, had always led a quiet and structured life, making his sudden and unexplained disappearance all the more baffling to those who knew him. Despite extensive searches and media coverage, no significant leads have surfaced over the years, leaving Anton's case unsolved. Chip Campbell lived with a roommate on Ward Basin Road in Milton, Florida, at the time of his mysterious disappearance. His roommate, Tanya Rios, claimed that the last time she saw him was around 10:30 p.m. on March 6, 2016. The following day, when she returned home, Campbell was gone, and the house was in a concerning state of disarray. There were muddy footprints tracked across the floor. The side door of the house was wide open, and even the refrigerator door stood ajar with vials of Campbell's insulin scattered on the floor. Campbell's phone was found in the bathroom, oddly with the battery removed. Outside the house, his beloved dog, who he always made sure to secure in a kennel or keep shut in his bedroom, was left unattended. This was highly unusual behavior for Campbell, who was known to take good care of his dog. 2 days later, on March 8th, Campbell was reportedly seen between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock p.m. at a Circle K convenience store located at the corner of Stewart Street and Munson Highway, about 3 miles from his residence. Witnesses described him as looking disheveled and unkempt, carrying 2 backpacks, one on his back and one in his hand. Strangely, when he left the Circle K, neither backpack was with him, and he hasn't been seen or heard from since. The police later recovered both backpacks, which contained several personal documents, including Campbell's EBT card, Social Security card, a copy of his father's birth certificate, and 2 blank bank deposit slips. Alongside these documents were diabetic medical supplies, some clothing, food, and survival items, hinting that Campbell may have been preparing for some sort of extended stay off the grid. In the year leading up to his disappearance, Campbell's family noticed a concerning change in his behavior. He had begun associating with individuals they considered to be bad influences and had fallen into drug use. Although he sought help through a substance abuse treatment program, he relapsed not long after. His sister, worried for his health, suspected that he had started using methamphetamine, which could have had catastrophic effects on his diabetes. Campbell's struggles continued to mount. In January 2016, just 2 months before he vanished, Campbell crashed his car while pulling out of the same Circle K convenience store where he was last seen. Although no one was hurt in the accident, his vehicle was totaled. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors noted he was experiencing what they termed diabetic seizures. This incident resulted in him losing his driver's license. Without a way to get to work, Campbell was forced to quit his job. He applied for disability benefits to help make ends meet, but in the months leading up to his disappearance, he was in severe financial distress as his benefits had not yet been approved. His family noted that he had lost a significant amount of weight during this difficult period. Campbell's family has always been suspicious about the circumstances surrounding his disappearance, particularly when it comes to his roommate, Tanya Rios. After Campbell vanished, his family went to check his house and were shocked to discover signs that the home had been used as a drug den for some time. Even more troubling, they found what appeared to be a makeshift meth lab in the attic. Their suspicions deepened when they learned that Rios had forged Campbell's father's name on 7 of his checks after he disappeared. She was eventually arrested on multiple charges, but after being released on bail, she fled and remained a fugitive for over a year before being apprehended in California. Despite her arrest, she has not provided any new information about Campbell's whereabouts. Adding to the mystery, Campbell had reportedly been receiving threats prior to his disappearance. He confided in a friend that he was considering arming himself for protection. At one point, he mentioned a desire to go off the grid, suggesting that he may have been planning to disappear intentionally. However, his family remains unconvinced that he would go this long without contacting them. They believe something more sinister may have occurred. His disappearance remains classified as suspicious, and to this day, the case remains unsolved. Linda K. Carroll was last seen in Crestview, Florida, on the evening of September 25, 1984. Her parents had dropped her off at her home on Kingston Road at approximately 8:30 p.m., marking the last confirmed sighting of her. Around 30 minutes after her parents left, neighbors reportedly heard screams coming from Linda's residence, followed by the sound of a car speeding away. The following day, when Linda failed to show up for her shift at Shawwell Farms Inc., she was reported missing. Despite her regular attendance at work, she never arrived to collect her last paycheck. Upon investigation, it was discovered that her purse and shoes were also missing from her home. Inside the house, police noted several unsettling details. Her bed had been stripped, and the sheets were nowhere to be found. Clumps of hair were found scattered around, and a single human hair was notably stuck to the door jamb. Investigators also found a note on the kitchen counter addressed to Linda's brother. The note stated that she had gone to Baker, Florida, to do laundry and instructed him to wait for her. Linda's brother had planned to visit her on the day she disappeared, but he ultimately did not make the trip. At the time of her disappearance, Linda was going through a tumultuous divorce and custody battle with her husband, Dennis Wayne Carroll. Their 5-year marriage had dissolved when Dennis left Linda in August of that year, taking their 2 young children with him to Tennessee. Linda, a devoted mother, was deeply distraught over being separated from her children. Following her disappearance, Dennis took on the role of raising the children and allegedly told them that their mother had abandoned them. Dennis claimed that on September 25th, the day Linda vanished, he had been driving from Tennessee to his mother's house in Meridian, Mississippi. Initially, he told his mother that he had driven straight through without any detours. However, when questioned by police, he admitted to making a detour to Florida that night and stopping by Linda's home. He claimed that when he arrived, she was not there, so he continued his journey to Mississippi. Suspicion toward Dennis deepened when one of his co-workers from Tennessee came forward with an alarming statement. The co-worker alleged that Dennis had previously asked him about using ether or chloroform to put someone to sleep. Furthermore, after Linda's disappearance, Dennis made no apparent efforts to locate her or contact authorities with any concern for her whereabouts. Over the years, Linda and Dennis's son revealed that Dennis had made multiple comments about how to dispose of someone without getting caught, which only fueled the suspicion surrounding him. Although Dennis was considered a primary suspect in Linda's disappearance, he was never formally charged. He maintained his innocence until his death from cancer in 2014. Linda had been living alone in her modest Kingston Road home at the time she went missing. The house lacked electricity, as Linda was living frugally to save money for a divorce attorney. She had recently started working at her first job and obtained a driver's license, although she did not yet own a car. Her family described her as an introverted person with few friends. Her disappearance has remained a mystery for nearly 4 decades, with foul play strongly suspected. Kelly Brannon, a 36-year-old woman, was last seen on July 15, 2020, at the Sunshine Inn in Live Oak, Florida. She and her boyfriend, Eddie Emerson, were en route from Micanopy, Florida, to Detroit, Michigan, traveling in separate vehicles loaded with their belongings, including a dog and 8 chickens. Their plan was to purchase a house in Detroit. However, their journey was interrupted on July 9th when Emerson's truck broke down, leading them to stay at the Sunshine Inn while awaiting repairs. On the night of July 14th, following an argument, Brannon left their hotel room but continued to communicate with Emerson via text messages. Around 10:30 p.m., Emerson found her outside the hotel, intoxicated and upset. Concerned for her safety, he took her car keys to prevent her from driving under the influence. Shortly after midnight, Brannon texted Emerson, expressing intentions to leave him and mentioning she was taking her car registration, a bag of clothes, and her guitar. Emerson advised her to return to the room and rest, but she did not comply, and he eventually went to sleep. Just before 1 a.m., Brannon left a voicemail for Emerson, stating she had secured another room at the hotel and was contemplating leaving for Detroit alone or possibly traveling to Iceland. The message ended abruptly with her saying she was getting in a car. Witnesses reported seeing her walking away from the hotel with her guitar around the same time. Since then, she has not been heard from. Brandon's purse, money, identification, and other personal items were found in her unlocked car at the hotel, but her phone and guitar were missing. Her phone has been inactive since her disappearance, and she did not have a charger with her. The missing guitar is a distinctive left-handed Fender Stratocaster with a sunburst finish and a sanded-off headstock branding. Emerson, who had a tumultuous relationship with Brandon, is considered a person of interest due to their history of domestic disputes. Despite this, he has cooperated with the investigation and maintains that he had no involvement in her disappearance and is unaware of her whereabouts. Brandon was known for her frequent travels and had a wide network of friends across the country. She consistently kept in touch with her mother in New Hampshire. The lack of communication since her disappearance has raised significant concerns among her family and friends, leading them to fear for her safety. As of now, her case remains unsolved. In the years following her disappearance, there have been community efforts to keep her case in the public eye. For instance, in September 2023, the Live Oak Police Department and Sewanee Valley Unsolved hosted an event to provide updates on Brandon's case, reflecting the ongoing concern and commitment to finding answers. Additionally, online communities and social media platforms have been instrumental in raising awareness about Brandon's disappearance. Pages like Missing Kelly Brandon on Facebook and accounts such as at Friends of KB on X are dedicated to sharing information and updates, hoping to generate leads that could assist in the investigation. Anyone with information regarding Kelly Brandon's disappearance is urged to contact the Live Oak Police Department at 386-362-7463 to remain anonymous and potentially receive a cash reward of up to $1,000. Individuals can reach out to Crime Stoppers of Sewanee County at 386-208-TIPS. Carrie Sephar Eli disappeared from Fort Myers, Florida, on January 5, 2017, under troubling circumstances that have left her family searching for answers ever since. At the time of her disappearance, she was living with her fiancé and his mother. On that fateful day, Sephar Eli, who was under the influence of drugs, suddenly ran away from the residence. Her fiancé tried to follow her, but was unable to catch up. This abrupt departure raised immediate concerns, especially because she left behind several essential personal belongings, including her dentures, purse, money, identification, and phone charger. Her phone's battery had died, making it impossible for her loved ones to contact her after she vanished. The situation became more concerning with each passing day. 3 days later, on January 8th, Sephar Eli was spotted at a Taco Bell restaurant located in the 3400 block of South Cleveland Avenue in Fort Myers. Witnesses reported that she was still wearing the same clothes she had on when she initially disappeared. She appeared disoriented and was seen talking to herself. One of the employees at the restaurant recognized her from missing persons posters that had been circulated in the area and promptly contacted her fiancé's mother. When Sephar Eli's fiancé's mother managed to speak to her over the phone, it was a glimmer of hope for her family. However, the conversation was brief and concerning. Sephar Eli admitted that she would not come home because she knew she was not supposed to be there if she was using drugs. Her fiancé's mother urged her to return home immediately, expressing concern for her safety, but Sephar Eli did not comply. That fleeting interaction at the Taco Bell would be the last time anyone would hear from her. Sephar Eli's sudden disappearance and subsequent refusal to return home left her family deeply worried. They emphasized that it was out of character for her to be out of touch for such an extended period, especially without any communication. Her family firmly believes she would never willingly abandon her young son, who was visiting relatives in Connecticut at the time she went missing. Her love and devotion to her son were well known among her loved ones, making her prolonged absence all the more perplexing and concerning.